everybody, this is Perch. How much of an adversarial relationship does the editor need with the writer, the artist, the people who are making the book? This is kind of an interesting question. So let me kind of let me reframe the question differently. An editor shouldn't have an adversarial relationship with the team working on the book. If they find themselves getting into that position, then they should probably get a different team. That if it's adversarial, meaning there's an active kind of argument and or fight going on with people involved in the book, then that's a clear sign that things are off track. It's not going to work. You need to recalibrate. You need to get a different team. You need to change things up, because otherwise that's rarely going to lead to good results. However, a lot has been made of how Jim Shooter used to behave in comics, and that he was depending on who you talk to, he was a drill sergeant. He was a taskmaster. He used to, yell at people to meet their dates. There's actually not that much, evidence that he would run around yelling at people to meet their dates, but he was apparently stern. He was apparently, didn't have the kind of touchy-feely aspects. I should probably frame that up differently via the Eddie Brazangas situation, but he wasn't he didn't have the soft skills to say, like maybe how's your family, how's your dog, how are things going? Oh, where are you going on vacation? You're going there. Oh, that's pretty cool. Where are the pages for my book? He just tended to stick to business, at least how he has been described as others have described him. And what's interesting is, depending on who you talk to, that was either a super valuable, important skill that everybody needed, or it was, it was a disaster. Nobody could work under those conditions. My take on it has always been, look, you need somebody in charge. It'd be wonderful if we lived in a world where you didn't need managers. And certain companies have tried that. Like, we don't need managers. We don't need, people in charge of finance or in charge of the company. We can all be at the same level. No reporting. We're all equals here. And we're all equals here. I mean, yeah, people should be treated as all equals, meaning, the senior, I do think companies that have, wildly obscene perks for senior executives generally have a bad culture. If you have the one that kind of always cracked me up a little bit was, when you go to companies and they have, reserved parking spots for the senior executives in the very, very front of the lot, except the executives rarely came to the office. They were often traveling and everything else. And so those spots were just empty the majority of the time, but were labeled with signs that showed everybody else who was coming into the office, hey, here's a spot that's better for somebody who's not even showing up to the office. Enjoy your day, you asshole. By the way, why would they do such a thing? Well, there is an answer to that. If the senior executive is coming into the office and they're going to do a meeting, arguably their time is worth a lot because they're paid very well. They're working with outside customers. You don't want them, trying to figure out a parking space somewhere on, level 18, and thus being late to the meeting. That's again the argument. Once again, that falls apart because the super senior executives tend to be driven to and from the office, and often are not driving themselves. So anyway, these are the kinds of things where, when you have a company culture, it's important not to have too much of a distance between lower level workers and senior workers. But the distance that you do want that is important is some sense of, authority chain. It is important to know who can make decisions and who is in charge. And sometimes the who can make decisions gets blurry and muddy when you have this kind of very flat org structure. And as soon as you get there, suddenly you get into a paralyzing situation where nobody can make a decision because nobody's sure who can make a decision. Or you get into a place where, somebody does make a decision, but other people feel comfortable to change or question or alter that decision because why not? We're all equals. And generally speaking, in most jobs, including the one you probably have, there are specialists that do certain things. You have somebody who's in charge of finance, who understands the tax code, who knows how to, keep the books aligned so the company does not get audited or sued. The person who has that skill set is very different from the person who is maybe the code engineer who's writing, React Native pages to ship a mobile app out into the world. Those two jobs are very different. Both of those jobs involve skill sets. Both of those jobs are, great when they're aligned to the specific tasks they're on, but if you randomly just switch those jobs, or if you let the developer, the engineer, suddenly get to second guess or override decisions the finance person was making on how to do their taxes, that would lead to chaos. You do need some level of, of chain of command. The funny thing about chain of command is a lot of people who are lower down the chain of command often want to they want to be promoted, they want to be higher up, they want to have those decisions, and then every now and then they get the chance to make those decisions and realize that, hey, when you're at that top level, the consequences of a bad choice, making the wrong decision, equals not just you being fired, but maybe half the company being fired, and that's not fun, as it turns out. I remember, a close friend of mine really is like, I want to be in management. I want to be in management. Finally got to be in management. 6 months later, there was a big round of layoffs, and that person who wanted to be in management suddenly had to go and basically tell 80 people they no longer had jobs. And it was amazing how the shine of management wore off at that point, and suddenly he wasn't that into it. With management comes responsibilities that sometimes suck. But of course, those responsibilities shouldn't be abused. I don't think that's that hard of a concept to understand. There's a balance there. In comics, the people who are editors need to have a chain of command like responsibility with the creative people they're working with. That goes with responsibility. Things that they need to do, they need to make sure they read the emails, they need to make sure they return the calls. That's pretty important. They need to make sure they review the work and not, ignore it. They need to make sure that if there's a block or a problem, or somebody needs to come off the project, that they're quick about making those changes so the work continues to flow. That's managerial responsibility. That's what they need to do. They also need to establish a tone where, through hopefully respect, but at least through position or title, they are seen as in control and in charge of the project. If the editor says, hey, we're doing a black label book for a horror audience, and you've turned in pages that, are cartoonishly kid-like, well, the editor needs to be able to step in and say, we're going to have to make changes to the pages of this book. It needs to be different. Go make those changes. And they need to have the authority to be able to say that, and they need to have to, when they do say it, people need to listen to them. A lot of editors, I mean, the relationship seems a little bit broken now, and it always was tough in comics because the people who are working in comics, the creatives, those are the ones whose names are on the cover. Those are the ones who are arguably selling the book via their name. It can be tough for an editor to come in and say, hey, Brian Michael Bendis, there's too many words on this page. You're going to need to drill it down. And Bendis can say, don't you know who I am? And the editor's like, I do. I also know what we're paying you, which is a lot. And because we're paying you, you need to produce a book that, is going to sell. And therefore, you're going to need to make these changes that I've determined as the editor. If you don't like it, then please go up the chain and get me fired. Now, Bendis being, a big name, he probably could accomplish that goal. But, call his bluff, see if he'll do it. But that's the relationship that editors need to be able to have. They need to be able to step in and say, hey, this doesn't look right. Hey, the way you colored this page does not fit the setting. The way you've lettered this page looks like ass. You need to change it. Hey, you do not have the character's dialogue right here at all. Hey, I can't help but notice that this character is, drawn radically different from page to page. Changes must be made. That's what an editor does need to do. And the responsibility, again, is that the editor needs to be able to make these decisions quickly and needs to be able to communicate them fast. A bad editor is somebody who basically knows they have that authority, but is lazy and basically doesn't provide the changes to the creative team until the 11th hour, and then suddenly is yelling and screaming about how changes need to be made, or as I like to call it, a Marvel classic. That kind of behavior is being bad at being a manager. But an editor does need to have that level of firm control over a project. That is the chain of command that is established in the whole system. Shouldn't let it go to their head, should treat people fairly, equally, with respect, but ultimately is in charge. So, what I think anyway. It's tough in the creative industry. It is definitely tough, but, doing important things is generally tough. Amazing. Thanks for listening.